Thank you for attending the Peel 2041 Plus Official Plan Review and Settlement Area Boundary Expansion Study public meeting. We'll just wait a couple more minutes to let anyone else join, and then we'll commence the meeting. Okay, we can now commence the meeting. We don't have too large a group tonight, so hopefully others will join. Again, welcome to the Peel 2041 Plus Official Plan Review and Settlement Area Boundary Expansion Study, or SABE, which is an acronym we'll be using many times this evening. I'm Andrew Goodyear from SVN Architects and Planners, and I will be facilitating this evening's meeting. The focus of tonight's meeting is resources, with technical study focus on mineral aggregates, cultural heritage, and archaeological impact. We have a full agenda for the evening. We will commence with introductions and an explanation of how to use Zoom. Stefan from Hempson will then present a summary of the Settlement Area Boundary Expansion Study and an overview of the resources technical studies that support the SABE study. This will be followed by a question and answer session with meeting participants, and finally concluding remarks. Please note that tonight's session will be recorded and posted on the region's website after the meeting in case anyone was unable to join or wishes to view it again. We'll be using Zoom's chat function as well, and everything in the chat will also be part of the public record. I will pass it to Tara and Adrian from the region to facilitate some introductions.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Andrew. My name is Tara Bonpensiero, and I'm an acting manager at the Region of Peel. I would like to welcome you to our virtual consultation for the Peel 2041 Settlement Area Boundary Expansion, session number 4 on resources. Before we begin this evening, it's appropriate to acknowledge the lands on which the Region of Peel operates, part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for these lands. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe-Chippewa people, the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. This is the final Peel 2041 Plus virtual session, but in case you missed it, any of the sessions held last week or earlier this week will be on the website, and as part of the presentation this evening, we will be sharing the website and where you can find them. This evening, though, the focus of our session is on the draft settlement boundary expansion studies related to resources, and that includes mineral aggregates, cultural heritage, and archaeological assessment. We are very interested in hearing your comments on the draft results of these studies. Peel has and will continue to be one of the fastest growing areas in the province and in the country. Recently, the province released new 2051 growth targets for Peel of 2.28 million by the year 2051. The region is undertaking an official plan review to ensure that we are well positioned to guide growth and development over the next 30 years in a responsible, sustainable way. We also find ourselves working to get your input in unusual times. Previously, we would have been having face-to-face conversations in a community center or library with referring to display boards. But this evening, we'll have to work together to share information and get your input through our new virtual world. And we hope you'll be patient with us as we work through this new approach. Fortunately, as you will hear through the presentation, there are many ways to provide your input beyond the session this evening before the draft reports are finalized by the end of this year. We look forward to hearing your thoughts and hope that you will continue to be involved in our process. At this time, I'd like to introduce a few people. Stefan from Hempson will be giving the main presentation this evening. Andrew Goodyear, as you already met, is facilitating the session this evening, and Blair Scorgi, both are from SVN Architects and Planners. From the region, Adrian Smith, Chief Planner and Acting Director, is on the line and will be providing some welcome remarks in a few moments. Also, Mark Head and Nahida Jamal, both managers at the region, as well as a number of other regional staff, are on the call and available to help answer any questions you may have. We also have staff from the local municipalities on the call, and they will be able to answer any questions that may come up related to their work. Thank you for your time tonight, and I will now pass it over to Adrian.
Okay, thank you very much, Tara and Andrew, and welcome everybody. Looking forward to the discussions today and this evening, and I know that this is the last session of a bunch of them, and the sessions that we held last week on the Peel 2041 Plus Official Plan Review and the Municipal Comprehensive Review, and the sessions earlier this week have all been successful. I'm sure we'll be able to build on it today. As I mentioned in those sessions earlier this week, the decision-making around settlement boundary expansion is really a fundamental part of our official plan review and our municipal comprehensive review. And as Tara mentioned, the recent decision from the province to extend the planning horizon out to 2051 and increase the growth allocation to Peel has certainly increased that importance. And the input that we get from stakeholders this evening, and the feedback that we received earlier this week, and the other opportunities for getting input is really critical to our work, and we certainly do take that into consideration, and it plays a big part in the work that we're doing. And the other thing to think about is that although the regional official plan policies and processes and boundary expansion is a really important one, it really is only the start of the planning process for the what will ultimately be the communities that evolve here out to 2041, 2051. There'll be lots more work required through the planning process. There's the local official plan process, secondary planning, phasing and staging work by the region and the town, as well as the detailed implementation studies, such as more detailed archaeological assessments that would happen at the individual planning process and individual applications, and all of that yet to come. And of course, there's opportunities for public input through each of those steps in the process as well. Anyway, thank you for participating this evening. Looking forward to it. And back to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Adrian. I'll pass it briefly to Blair Scorgi, who will explain how to use Zoom and who will conduct a couple of polls to give us a sense of who's joined us this evening. Blair?
Thank you, Andrew. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. As Andrew mentioned, my name is Blair Scorgi, and I'm a senior planner at SVN Architects and Planners. So before we begin tonight's presentation, I would like to spend just a few minutes to introduce you to the Zoom platform and provide you with an overview of how it's going to be used for the purposes of tonight's meeting. So for those of you who are joining us on your computer, tablet, or smartphone device using the Zoom app, near the bottom of your screen, you will see a chat icon. Clicking on this icon will open up the chat window. In my case, if I click it, it opens up on the right-hand side of my screen. Near the bottom of the chat window, you will see a box that indicates where to type your message. Please type your question here at any time through the course of the presentation. If you happen to be joining us by telephone tonight and are not using the Zoom app, you're just calling in, you can press *9 to indicate at any time that you have a question. This will, on our side, this will appear as though you're raising your hand virtually, and we will know that you have a question. So to ensure that we can cover all material in a timely fashion this evening, we will be leaving our microphones off and muted throughout the course of the meeting. Questions will be held until the end of the presentation, following which my colleague Andrew, who you've met, will facilitate a question and answer period. Questions in the chat box will be read aloud by Andrew at that time. If you are joining us by telephone and have pressed *9 on your microphone will be unmuted at the appropriate time, and either your last name or the digits on your phone number will be called, whatever appears on our end. It'll be one or the other, and you'll be asked to state your question. To ensure that everybody has an opportunity to participate, we're going to respectfully ask that you limit your questions to one at a time. Once everybody's first question has been addressed, we will then open the floor to additional questions. In addition to the question and answer period itself, participants who are joining us using the Zoom app will also have an opportunity to participate in a series of poll questions tonight. At key points throughout the presentation, questions will be asked and the poll window will open on your screen. When this happens, please complete the polling exercise by clicking on the appropriate response. Upon completion of the polling exercise, the results will be tabulated and shared with all participants. The findings from the polling exercise, as well as the feedback that we obtained tonight throughout the question and answer period itself, will be summarized in a consultation and engagement report, which will be shared on the dedicated project website in the weeks following this meeting. So without further ado, let's initiate our first polling question. So now you should see this polling question popping up on your screen. The question is, where do you live? We're trying to get a sense of where everybody is joining us from tonight. Are you joining us from Brampton, Caledon, Mississauga, or outside of Peel region? So we'll give this a few more seconds so everybody has a chance to participate. Okay. So as we can see, 29% of us joining from the city of Brampton, 29% joining us from the town of Caledon, 14% from the city of Mississauga, and the remaining 29% outside of Peel region. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, then we're going to dive into the presentation. Question number 2. What best describes you as a participant today? And in this case, you can select multiple responses. So select all that apply. It's multiple choices. So are you a resident, a farmer, a business owner, member of the development or building industry, a member of a non-governmental organization, local municipal government partner, or other? Okay, we'll give a few more seconds for people to respond. Okay, we'll share the results. So 17% of participants are residents. No farmers or business owners in the crowd. We've got 17% of participants are members of the development or building industry, 50% from local municipal government partners, and 70% identified as being other. Okay, so thank you for that. Without further ado, I'll hand it back over to Andrew.
Thanks, Blair. So we're now going to commence the presentation, which will be delivered by Stefan from Henson. Just a reminder that any questions you do have will be addressed following the presentation, but feel free to enter your questions in the chat bar at any time throughout the presentation. I'll now pass it to Stefan.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew and Blair. My name is Stefan Cetrinovich. I work for Henson Consulting in Toronto. I'm on the consulting team that's assisting the region with this settlement area boundary expansion study. And as Blair's just shown you, we're going to have some polling questions that are interspersed at various points during the presentation. I just wanted to assure you from the beginning that that these are not intended to be scientific polls, and the results will certainly not be used to determine where new urban lands are located. Their purpose is solely to help us get a sense about whether you understand the material that's being presented and whether you agree or disagree with some of the approaches that have been used for these studies. So the focus of the next 30 minutes will be on the latest findings of the region's SABE study. I'm going to spend a few minutes initially on how this study fits into the broader official plan review that the region's undertaking. And I will again apologize to those of you who've joined us for the earlier sessions this week and who now have to sit patiently through the same introductory slides for the 4th day in a row. Our main focus after this introduction will be the results of some of the background technical work, which was released at the beginning of the summer and which will guide decisions about where best to designate new urban lands in Caledon. As Tara mentioned, the SABE study is just one of many being undertaken as part of the region's official plan review. And the official plan itself is a very important document. It guides, among many things, how growth is managed and how services are delivered in Peel. And of course, it needs periodic updating to ensure that it reflects the evolving needs of Peel communities, changing provincial priorities, and of course, the rapidly changing pattern of development in the region. The recent update started in 2013 and will be completed by 2022. The official plan review has recently been rebranded from Peel 2041 to Peel 2041 Plus because the time horizon for growth planning, as Adrian mentioned, and which the region is required to follow, was recently extended to 2051 under the Provincial Growth Plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And I'll speak to these changes in a little more detail in a minute. But as you can see from the graphic up on the screen, the settlement area boundary expansion study, although it's a very important study, is just one of the many focus areas that make up the Peel 2041 Plus work. Work in other focus areas are in various stages of development, and draft policies for many of these focus areas were presented in last week's public sessions on the official plan. And if you'd like to know more about Peel 2041 Plus, there's an excellent introductory video to the overall review on the region's official plan review webpage. Now, the need for the SABE study is really driven by the reality that Peel region, which is already one of the fastest growing areas in Southern Ontario, will continue to grow rapidly in the coming decades. There's a few figures for you on the screen here. As I mentioned, the regional official plan must conform to the growth plan, which is the provincial plan which manages growth in the Greater Toronto Area, the City of Hamilton, and an outer ring of municipalities that surround the GTA. And in late August, Schedule 3 to the growth plan was amended to extend the time horizon for planning from 2041 to 2051. The amendment also now requires the region to achieve 2.3 million people and 1.1 million jobs by that new 2051 time horizon. So these new targets represent more than 300,000 people and almost 100,000 more jobs than what we were previously planning for to 2041. And indeed, the previous 2041 targets were about 40% more people and jobs than were in Peel at the time of the last census in 2016. So this is, by any measure, very rapid growth that the region must plan for over the long term. Now, no doubt, much of that growth can be accommodated in existing urban areas as intensification, principally in Mississauga and Brampton, and generally close to major transit station areas and downtowns in those cities. However, work that's being undertaken as part of the growth management focus area clearly demonstrates that new urban land will be required to achieve these population and employment targets over the next 30 years. And that new urban land will have to be in Caledon. There simply isn't enough space in the cities to the south to accommodate this. And so the main purpose of the SABE study then is to determine the best location for those additional lands, both for new community uses, which are generally focused around residential development, as well as for lands for the exclusive use of economic activities, i.e. employment lands. And we've approached this study by conducting a thorough evidence-based review of a focus study area, which is located in southern Caledon, within agricultural lands often referred to as the White Belt. 12 technical studies have been undertaken on this area to provide decision makers with information about the characteristics of the land in the focus study area and its suitability or unsuitability for urban expansion. The 12 studies cover a whole range of topics, from the amount of growth that might occur to the form and location of development that might be needed to accommodate it, to the demands on municipal services like parks and rec facilities, libraries, roads, transit, water, and wastewater systems, as well as the demands on school boards and other public agencies as well. Certainly, each study is an important piece of the SABE puzzle. However, we recognize that some of these studies, particularly those whose results depend upon the location of development in the FSA, will likely be more determinative than others when delineating the SABE boundaries. We hope that this week's sessions will allow you to weigh in on which study results you think are important for us to consider as we move to the next phase of the work. Collectively, the technical studies, whether they're determinative or not, will help guide the future planning of the SABE, and particularly in the subsequent master servicing plans and more local secondary plans that the town of Caledon will be undertaking in the coming years. And you can see from this graphic up on the screen how the SABE works sets the overall framework and strategic direction for these local plans, and then the land use regulations like zoning and the more specific site plan requirements that are needed for making decisions about development applications. And all of this more detailed planning is going to come much later, well after the new official plan has been approved. Finally, just a couple of other points about the studies. First, they were posted on the region's SABE project webpage back in June, together with a comprehensive summary document. And the findings of the studies were presented to council at the same time. And secondly, the studies are still in draft. This is just one of many consultations that we've done on the studies, and we plan to use the feedback, the considerable feedback we've received so far to finalize the studies by the end of the year. Now, this slide here shows you a map of Southern Caledon and identifies the FSA, which is shown in pink. The FSA was delineated based on criteria developed through a workshop, which was held with local, municipal, and regional staff and agencies. And this map was released for public consultation in the first week of March, just before the COVID lockdown. And you can see from the map that the FSA covers almost all of the White Belt lands and excludes the provincial Green Belt to the north. You'll also see that the FSA is quite large. This was done deliberately, in part in order to ensure that we had sufficient land to accommodate additional growth that might arise from the growth plan amendment, which we knew was coming. And if you look in the right-hand corner of the map, you'll see a blue box. This represents the approximate land requirement for the SABE to 2041. It's about 1,300 hectares of land. And the current estimate is that for 2051, that blue box will need to be anywhere between 2 and 4 times as large as what's shown here. You'll also see that the FSA is somewhat framed by significant natural features, such as the valley lands that run north-south to the west of Bolton. And the FSA is also framed by the route of the GTA West Highway, which will likely be the most significant piece of infrastructure constructed in this part of the town. I should note that the highway route shown here is not the preferred route that was released in August by the province. However, the new route differs only slightly from the one shown on screen. The only substantive difference is the relocation of the Bolton Highway intersection, which is on the extreme right of the highway corridor, slightly to the west. And that may have some consequences for land use plans in that area, including the ROPA 30 lands, which are currently under appeal at the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal. And those lands you can see in the yellow hatching that extend north of that intersection. And so then to the technical studies themselves. I'm just going to outline very briefly the methodologies that were used, the principles which guide them, and the general conclusions that were reached. We've left lots of time at the end of this presentation to answer questions and have a more general discussion on the study findings. As I mentioned, there are 12 studies altogether, and for presentation purposes, we've organized them into 4 themes. And the first theme covers the natural environment, including physical features, the climate and the impact of climate change, and the state of agriculture in the focus study area. Excuse me, that theme was dealt with in yesterday's session. The second theme addresses the resources in the FSA, both the natural resources and the cultural and archaeological heritage that's present in the area. And this is the theme that we'll be focusing on tonight. The hard infrastructure requirements for the anticipated growth in the SABE, that would be the water, the wastewater, and the transportation infrastructure. That's dealt with under this third theme. And given that this infrastructure will have a significant bearing on the financial impact of the urban expansion plans, the fiscal impact technical study is included under this theme. That theme was addressed in the Tuesday session this week. And then finally, the session that was held on Monday, we have the growth management and built environment theme. And this focuses on the spatial arrangement of community lands through the perspective of community health and public facility needs, as well as the distribution of lands for commercial and employment uses that might be required. If you missed the earlier sessions, as Tara mentioned, there will be recordings of them that will be posted on the region's SABE project webpage. I'm going to spend the next couple of slides just going through very generally the purpose and approach used by the 3 studies under the resources theme that we're going to address tonight. So the first study is the mineral aggregates study. And the intent of this study is to map high potential mineral aggregate resources and address any potential provincial policy requirements regarding buffering around these kinds of areas. Mineral aggregates, by the way, cover rocks and minerals like gravel, sand, clay, shale, or granite that are suitable for construction or industrial or manufacturing purposes. The second study, the cultural heritage study, aims to establish an inventory of known and potential cultural heritage resources in the FSA with a view to guiding decisions about the location of the SABE and cultural heritage preservation. And the stage 1 archaeological impact assessment is a desktop review of known archaeological sites, as well as historical settlement patterns to assess the potential for further archaeological sites in the focus study area. Each study took a somewhat different approach to the matter at hand and was really tailored to the availability of data for the focus study area and the local conditions that are present on the ground in the FSA. So for the mineral aggregate study, there are statutory requirements relating to resource management that trigger the need for the mineral aggregate study, and more particularly, the need for an inventory of aggregate resources within the FSA and its surrounding areas. The cultural heritage study includes a desktop review of the focus study area, drawing on historical mapping of early settlement patterns, an assessment of the policy requirements, and also results in an inventory of cultural heritage resources. And the archaeological impact assessment uses a very similar approach: a review of the history of development in the area, a review of the policy framework, and then a spatial analysis of the FSA through the lens of its archaeological potential. So let's deal with mineral aggregates first. The growth plan requires that when expanding a settlement boundary, you must apply policies related to the wise use and management of resources. And there are similar policies under the protecting public health and safety sections of the provincial policy statement, which the SABE exercise must be consistent with. The key data source for this study was the Ontario Geological Survey, aggregate resource inventory papers, and these provide detailed information on the physical geography of designated aggregate resource areas throughout the region. The study found that while the focus study area itself does not contain any high potential mineral aggregates, there are potential mineral deposits just northwest of the FSA, west of Bolton. And these deposits are classified as secondary deposits, meaning that they contain significant amounts of sand and gravel. And so any extraction in this area may therefore require a 300 to 500 meter buffer from future development. And so the current recommendation is that the region engage with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry to confirm the buffer requirements if the SABE is identified near this particular deposit, and if further study and mapping is needed. This next slide shows you where this particular deposit is located. You can see it's colored in gray and it's surrounded by the red box here. It's referred to as the Humber Resource Area. And as I say, this area is located outside the focus study area, but it's close enough that it may require a buffer that extends into the focus study area if the SABE is proposed nearby. So we're just going to pause here for a second and ask our third polling question. Please remember that these are being used only to inform the Q&A session to follow and to give the team here a sense that we're communicating the information to you clearly and that you think we're on the right track. So the question is, do you generally agree with the approach used for the mineral aggregate study? And you can answer yes, no, or don't know. I think we had 6 responses before, so we'll sort of stop shortly after we get to 6. Five might be good enough. Okay, so generally a fairly a positive response there, recognizing we have a fairly small crowd this evening. And by the way, there are no rules for how you answer these questions. You may totally agree with some of the principles behind what we're doing, or disagree with only one of them, or think that there are more than 3 if you give you 3. So whether you agree or disagree is entirely sort of up to you, and you can decide the parameters of how to do it. We're simply trying to gauge whether you think we are thinking about this topic properly. And so to cultural heritage then. The first European settlers in this part of Caledon were Scottish and Irish farmers, part of several waves of immigration as those nations experienced rapid population growth and land enclosure and farm clearances. And these people started to arrive in Caledon in numbers around 1819 to 1820. And throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, they set the stage for the rural and agricultural character that we see today. So the farms, the arrangement of the farming, the stone quarry operations, the grist and the sawmills. And so many of the surviving cultural heritage resources relate to these activities and the places of worship and other institutions that were central to the lives of these communities. The growth plan requires that cultural heritage resources be conserved, and it also encourages municipalities to prepare cultural plans and consider them in decision-making. And so this assessment of cultural heritage in the FSA has identified 139 confirmed or potential cultural heritage resources, including 4 designated heritage properties, 23 properties that are listed on the town's heritage register, 111 properties identified as potential cultural heritage resources, and 1 cultural heritage landscape that had been previously identified by the town. And overall, the analysis concluded that the resources that have been identified here will be able to be conserved and integrated with future urban land uses. And because these resources are fairly evenly distributed throughout the focus study area, no one area was preferred for urban expansion over another, at least from the perspective of cultural heritage. So then to our second polling question. That's a similar question to the previous one about mineral aggregates. Do you generally agree with the approach used for the cultural heritage assessment? Yes, no, or don't know. Okay, well, we've had answers from our 5 previous respondents, so I think we can stop it there. And again, we appear to be on the right track generally with this. Now, obviously, human settlement in Caledon predates European settlement in the area, and by many thousands of years. And we've already seen through the land acknowledgement at the beginning of this session that this land was the home of several different First Nations communities. And as with cultural heritage resources, the growth plan encourages municipalities to prepare archaeological management plans and consider them as well in decision making. And so this stage 1 archaeological impact assessment is a sort of non-invasive survey of archaeological resources in the FSA. The study concludes that approximately 78%, about 6,500 hectares of the focus study area, exhibits potential for the presence of Indigenous and/or Euro-Canadian archaeological resources. So if these resources are located in the SABE and slated for development, these areas will likely require more in-depth archaeological assessment, and either stage 2, stage 3, or stage 4. And those stages reflect the level of invasiveness, shall we say. Additionally, there are some sites in the FSA that will require an assessment of potential burial sites associated with churches. I should point out that, that the need to undertake these additional archaeological assessments doesn't necessarily preclude development. Rather, it requires that negative impacts to archaeological resources be mitigated prior to development occurring. And it's really only in rare cases that mitigation measures are so substantial that a developer will choose not to develop all or a portion of the site. As Adrian mentioned at the beginning, the archaeological potential of sites in the FSA is going to be further reviewed as part of the Town of Caledon's Archaeological Management Plan. That's currently underway, and it will inform the town's official plan policies. So one final polling question then. Do you generally agree with the approach used for the Stage 1 archaeological assessment? Yes, no, or don't know. Okay, I think we've got our 5, so we can probably stop it there. So we're going to wind things up. I'm just going to give you a quick summary, but certainly if you're thinking at all of asking a question, we've got lots of subject matter experts on the line, and so please start formulating it, and we'd love to see it posted in the chat so that we can address it. The next steps here will be that we're going to use the principles and general conclusions that were presented here to guide us in delineating a preliminary SABE area for regional council to consider. But I would just reiterate the message from earlier that the SABE is really just the first step in the planning process for Southern Caledon. There's lots of detailed planning and zoning and site planning to come after what is essentially a very macro level, regional scale analysis through this piece of work. So I'm going to stop it there and hand it back to Andrew. Thank you very much for indulging me, and looking forward to answering any questions people may have.
Thank you very much, Stefan. No one's entered a question at this time, but we're happy to take anything that you would like to comment on or ask a question on. And if you prefer, given that the number is quite small, you can certainly just indicate in chat that you have a question and we can likely unmute you and deal with it that way. While you're thinking about what you might ask, I have a couple of questions I can ask of you that might help formulate some of your comments. Really, if you want to respond on anything you've heard tonight, perhaps the principles or anything, if you have any questions on the overall SABE study, we'd be happy to answer them. Perhaps you have some local knowledge that we should be aware of in the study area that may inform the technical studies, or you may wish to indicate that you were surprised by some of the outcomes of the draft technical studies, and we can address any comment you have. We do have a question from Greg. Can you advise when it is expected that the mineral aggregate resource policies will be discussed in the context of the ROPA? Let's see, I'm not sure who is best to answer that. It may be possibly Stefan or Mark.
I think it should probably go to Mark or Gail.
Okay, sure.
So good evening, it's Gail. So in regards, right now, what was undertaken was a phase 1 assessment, and that was to identify the location of any potential mineral aggregate resources in relation to the focus study area. As the focus study area assessment is advanced, if it is determined that a preferred location is within proximity to the identified mineral aggregate resource deposit, then further detailed examination would need to be undertaken at that time, and at that time is when we would start looking at it in relation to a regional official plan amendment.
Thank you, Gail.
Andrew, yeah, I can add to that.
Sure.
The mineral aggregate resources policy review component, of the official plan review is also advancing. So we will be bringing on a consultant to assist in some of that work, and the timing will be in 2021, when we'll be ready to consult on draft policies on that, if that was the question. And certainly if you have follow-up questions for that scope of work, you can either connect back with us through the website, contact Gail or myself. And if there's any further questions tonight on that, we'd be happy to take them. And back to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Mark. Raymond has asked if there's a final date to submit comments regarding the technical studies and the draft policies. We're certainly going to provide you with ways that you can submit your comments. I'm not sure of what the deadline might be. I can pass that to Tara initially to see if we've determined sort of that last date.
That's a great question. So because we are aiming to have the studies finalized to council by the end of the year, we would appreciate it if we could get comments on the draft studies at the latest the week of October 23rd, if possible.
Great, thank you. So we've scheduled another 45 minutes, so we're happy to take any comments or questions that you may have. Feel free to enter in the chat or indicate that you'd like to ask a question. Again, anything on the SABE study, local knowledge, anything that surprises you about the studies, or anything else you'd like to bring to our attention, we'd be happy to hear it. And if not, we will provide you with ways that you can submit your comments and questions after tonight's meeting, in case you think of something. What I can do, perhaps while people are sort of thinking through, oh, here we go. We have a question from Andrew Walker. The SABE study is focusing on the South Caledon lands. Is the region also looking at the other villages such as Caledon East and Caledon Village? Tara, would you? Oh, great. Thanks, Tara.
I can take that one too, yeah. So Andrew, yes, we are taking a look at some of the rural settlements that are, I guess, more northerly and in the Greenbelt, and we will be getting in touch with. We do have a number of people that have submitted requests for us to take a look at particular properties, and you're absolutely correct. These technical studies have focused on the focus study area in the southern part of Caledon. But we are working on a subsequent technical study that we expect to have done in the next little while, and then we would be in touch with those particular people that had submitted us requests to provide a similar session to this, but more focused on the policies and framework and things that we would be looking at for potential expansions to some of those other areas. So stay tuned. We are definitely still on it. And we do hope to get in touch shortly.
Thanks, Tara. Another question from Greg. Well, he doesn't think it is relevant to the boundary extension. It is important that the correct mapping be used to delineate aggregate resources in Caledon. The ARIP maps are several generations old, and the OGF Earth are the most up-to-date that should be used.
Good evening. So it's Gail again. And Greg, thank you for that information. And we absolutely do agree. So as Mark had mentioned, we are in the process of engaging with a consultant who will be assisting us in drafting a discussion paper, but a part of that process will also be doing an evaluation of the methodology that the region is using to update the high potential mineral aggregate resource area mapping on Schedule C of the regional official plan. So through that process, we will be confirming the appropriate data layers that need to be used in the mapping update.
Thank you, Gail and Greg. General comment from iPhone, so I'm not sure who it is, but it's a nice comment actually. Great presentations, love the Zoom format, great work everyone. Great way to be informed without having to travel everywhere every night, which That is one benefit actually of Zoom. You can do this from your home, and so you don't have to travel over the place. Although I do miss being with people in person, there are some benefits from the Zoom platform. Thank you. So what we can do while people are thinking if they have any more questions, we don't have to end it just yet, but I can start to indicate what our next steps are and how you can provide further comment if you'd like. We've stated that more information about the Peel 2041 Plus and SABE processes is available on the region's website. And if we can go to, I think it's the next slide or one of the slides, there's an indication of where that link is. So you can see that link at the bottom of the slide deck there. That's where you'll find more information on the studies, and I expect the link to tonight's presentation and all the other presentations from this week that you can view again. And just our next steps will be, we're going to be holding, this is the final public consultation for the technical studies, but we will be taking all the information that we've received from these sessions and from earlier sessions with staff and council to consider amendments or updates to the technical studies. And an update on the SABE will be delivered to council in December 2020, I believe it is. And oh, there's a link there that Helen has added where the recording of the online sessions can be on the Peel Region website. Thanks for that, Helen. And if you do have any additional questions or comments that you think of after this session, you can submit them to, and we can put up the contact information. It's Catherine and Tara. Which I think is the last slide in the presentation, which we will put up shortly, that'll indicate how you can submit further questions. Oh, perhaps we can enter them. I'm not sure there is another, we might have not included that slide, so we can perhaps enter that in the chat. If anyone has that information, we can enter the contact information. There we go. Thank you very much. Helen's added the email address of Tara, so you can certainly submit your comment or question. We would be happy to get back to you. We can give it a couple more minutes to make sure we've covered everything, but if not, we thank you very much for attending the session tonight, for all of your questions, and some of you have actually attended all 4 sessions, I believe, so we thank you for your commitment to this process. Okay, that may be it for this evening. Thank you all. We appreciate your support. Have a great evening.